Lecture 2 Western versus Bharatiya View. Yesterday, we'd seen that even after 17 years of independence, we have still to decide what direction we should adopt to realize our cherished dream of all-round development in the lives of our countrymen. Normally, people are not prepared to seriously consider this question. They think only of the problems which they face from time to time. Sometimes economic problems are viewed with concern and an attempt is made to resolve them, and at other times social or political problems come to the forefront claiming attention. Not knowing fundamentally the direction in which we all are to go, these efforts are not accompanied by sufficient enthusiasm, nor do they give a feeling of satisfaction to the people engaged in these efforts. These efforts produce only a fraction of the results that they ought to have produced. Modern versus ancient. However, there are two distinct types of people who suggest some definite direction. There are some who suggest that we must go back to the position where we lost our independence and restart from there. On the other hand, there are people who would like to discard all that originated here in Bharat, and they are not ready to give a second thought to it. They seem to think that Western life and thoughts are the last word in progress and all of them should be imported here if we are to develop. Both these lines of thoughts are incorrect, though they do represent partial truths, and it will not be proper to reject them altogether. They who advocate starting from where we left off 1,000 years ago forget that whether it may or may not be desirable, it is definitely impossible. The flow of time cannot be reversed. In the past 1,000 years, whatever we assimilated, whether it was forced on us or we took it with willingness, cannot be discarded now. Besides, we too have original creations in the life of our society. We did not always remain mere passive witness to whatever new challenging situations arose, nor did we merely react to every alien action. We too have attempted to reshape our life as was required to face the new situations. Therefore, we cannot afford to shut our eyes to all that has happened in the past 1,000 years. Similarly, those who would like to make Western ideologies basis of our progress forget that these ideologies have arisen in certain special situations and times. They are not necessarily universal. They cannot be free from the limitations of the particular people and their culture which gave birth to these isms. Besides, many of these are already out of date. The principles of Marx have changed both with the changing times as well as with varying condition to the extent that parrot-like repetition of Marxism for solving problems facing our country would amount to a reactionary attitude rather than a scientific and pragmatic one. It is indeed surprising that they who claim to reform the society by removing dead traditions themselves fall prey to some outdated foreign traditions. Learn, but do not ape others. Every country has its own peculiar historical, social, and economic situation, and its leaders decide the remedies for the ills that beset the country from time to time, taking into consideration its background. It is illogical to believe that remedies which the leaders of one country decide to try for their problems are likely to be effective as such to all other peoples. A simple illustration will suffice. Even though the basic organic activity is the same in all human beings, the drugs which may be helpful in England may not prove equally helpful in Bharat. Diseases also depend upon climate, water, dietary habits, and heredity. Even though the external symptoms may be apparently similar, the same drug does not necessarily cure all persons. Those who apply a single panacea to all diseases must be considered quacks rather than doctors. Therefore, Ayurveda states, Yad deshasya yo jantuh tad deshasya tasyaushadham. That is, for the disease in each place, a remedy suitable to that place must be found. Therefore, it is neither possible nor wise to adopt foreign isms in our country in the original form in toto. It will not be helpful in achieving happiness and prosperity. On the other hand, it needs to be realized that not all the thoughts and principles that have sprung up elsewhere are necessarily local in space and time. The response of human beings in a particular place, time, and social atmosphere may, and does in many cases, have relation and use to other human beings elsewhere and at other times. Therefore, to ignore altogether the development in other societies, past or present, is certainly unwise. Whatever truths these developments contain must be taken note of and accepted. The rest must be scrupulously avoided. While absorbing the wisdom of the other societies, it is only proper that we avoid their mistakes and perversities. Even their wisdom should be adapted to our particular circumstances. In brief, we must absorb the knowledge and gains of the entire humanity so far as eternal principles and truths are concerned. Of these, the ones that originated in our midst have to be clarified and adapted to changed times, and those that we take from other societies have to be adapted to our conditions. Nationalism, democracy, and socialism. Western political thought has accepted nationalism, democracy, and socialism or equality as ideals. Besides, now and then there have been attempts directed at world unity which took the shape of the League of Nations and after the Second World War, the United Nations Organization. For a variety of reasons, these have not succeeded. However, these definitely were attempts in that direction. All these ideals have in practice proved to be incomplete and mutually opposing. Nationalism led to conflict between nations, which led in turn to global conflict. Whereas, if status quo is regarded as synonymous with world peace, the aspirations of many small nations to be independent would remain ever unfulfilled. World unity and nationalism conflict with each other. Some advocate suppression of nationalism for world unity, whereas others regard world unity as an utopian ideal and emphasize national interest to the utmost. Similar difficulty arises in reconciling socialism and democracy. Democracy grants individual liberty, but the same is used by the capitalist system for exploitation and monopolization. Socialism was brought in to end exploitation, but it destroyed freedom and dignity of the individual. Mankind stands confused and is unable to decide what the correct path is for future progress. The West is not in a position to say with confidence that this alone and no other is the right path. It is itself groping. Therefore, simply to follow the West would be an instance of the blind being led by the blind. Claim of Bharatiya culture. In this situation, our attention is claimed by the Bharatiya culture. Is it possible that our culture can point the direction to the world? From the national standpoint, we shall have to consider our culture because that is our very nature. Independence is intimately related to one's own culture. If culture does not form the basis of independence, then the political movement for independence would be reduced simply to a scramble by selfish and power-seeking persons. Independence can be meaningful only if it becomes an instrument for expression of our culture. Such expression will not only contribute to our progress, but the effort required will also give us experience of joy. Therefore, both from the national as well as human standpoint, it has become essential that we think of the principles of Bharatiya culture. If, with its help, we can reconcile the various ideals of Western political thought, then it will be an added advantage for us. These Western principles are a product of revolution in human thought and social conflict. They represent one or the other aspiration of mankind, and it is not proper to ignore them. Bharatiya culture is holistic. The first characteristic of Bharatiya culture is that it looks upon life as an integrated whole. It has an integrated viewpoint. To think of parts may be proper for a specialist, but it is not useful from the practical standpoint. The confusion in the West arises primarily from its tendency to think of life in sections and then to attempt to put them together by patchwork. We do admit that there is diversity and plurality in life, but we have always attempted to discover the unity behind them. This attempt is thoroughly scientific. The scientists always attempt to discover order in the apparent disorder in the universe, to find out principles governing the universe, and frame practical rules on the basis of these principles. Chemists discovered that a few elements comprise the entire physical world. Physicists went one step further and showed that even these elements pulsate with energy. Today, we know that the entire universe is only a form of energy. Philosophers are also basically scientists. The Western philosophers reached up to the principle of duality. Hegel put forward the principle of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Karl Marx used his principle as a basis and presented his analysis of history and economics. Darwin considered the principle of survival of the fittest as the sole basis of life. But we in this country perceived the basic unity of all life. Even the dualists have believed nature and spirit to be complementary to each other rather than contradictory. The diversity in life is merely an expression of the internal unity. There is complementarity underlying the diversity. The unity in seed finds expression in various forms: the roots, the trunk, the branches, the leaves, the flowers, and the fruits of the tree. All these have different forms and colors and even to some extent different properties. Still, we recognized their relation of unity with each other through the seed. Conflict, sign of cultural regression. Unity in diversity and the expression of unity in various forms have remained the central thought of Bharatiya culture. If this truth is wholeheartedly accepted, then there will not exist any cause for conflict among various powers. Conflict is not a sign of culture or nature, rather it is a symptom of perversion. The law of the jungle, survival of the fittest, which the West discovered in recent years, was known to our philosophers. We have recognized desire, anger, etc. among the 6 lower tendencies of human nature, but we did not use them as the foundation or the basis of civilized life or culture. There are thieves and robbers in society. It is essential to save ourselves and society from these elements. We cannot consider them as our ideals or standards of human behavior. Survival of the fittest is the law of the jungle. Civilizations have developed not on the basis of this law, but by consideration of how the operation of this law could be reduced to the minimum in human life. If we wish to progress, we have to keep this history of civilization before our minds. Mutual cooperation. Cooperation also obtains in abundance just as conflict and competition in this world. Vegetation and animal life keep each other alive. We get our oxygen supply with the help of vegetation, whereas we provide carbon dioxide, so essential for the growth of vegetable life. This mutual cooperation sustains life on this earth. The recognition of this element of mutual sustenance among different forms of life and taking that as the basis of an effort to make human life mutually sustaining is the prime characteristic of civilization. To mold nature or prakriti to achieve social goals is culture or sanskriti. But when this nature leads to social conflict, it is perversion or vikriti. Culture does not regard or deny nature. Rather, it enhances those elements in nature which are helpful in sustaining life in this universe, makes it fuller and richer, and curbs others which obstruct or destroy life. Let us take a simple illustration. These relationships, such as brother and sister, mother and son, father and son, are natural. These are same both in man as well as among animals. Just as two brothers are sons of one mother, so also two calves are sons of a single mother cow. Where then lies the difference? The animals forget these natural relationships. They cannot build up an edifice of civilization on those relations. But men use this natural relation as a basis to construct a more harmonious order in life, to establish other relationships flowing from these basic relationships, so as to knit the whole society as a single unit of cooperation. Thus, various values and traditions are built. Standards of good and bad are determined accordingly. In society, we find instances of both affection as well as enmity between brothers, but we consider affection good and aim at enhancing affectionate brotherly relations. The opposite tendency is disapproved. If conflict and enmity are made the basis of human relationships, and if on this basis history is analyzed, then it would be futile to dream of world peace resulting out of such a course of action. Nature to culture. A mother brings up her children. A mother's love is considered as the highest love. On such a basis alone, we can devise the rules regulating the life of mankind. Sometimes there are examples of selfishness and cruelty of a mother towards her child. Among some species of animals, the mother devours her progeny to satisfy her hunger. On the other hand, among monkeys, the mother carries her child long after its death. Both types of behavior are found among living beings. Which of these two principles of nature can be made the basis of a civilized life? We cannot but conclude that alone which helps to sustain life can be chosen. The contrary cannot lead to a civilized life. Human nature has both tendencies, anger and greed on the one hand, and love and sacrifice on the other. All these are present in our nature. Anger, greed, etc. are natural to man and beasts alike. For this reason, if we make anger a basis of our life and arrange our efforts accordingly, then the result will be lack of harmony in our life. Therefore, the exhortation, do not yield to anger. Even when anger arises in one's mind, one can exercise control over it, and one should do so. Thus, control becomes a standard of our life and not anger. Such laws are known as the principles of ethics. These principles are not framed by anyone, they are discovered. A suitable analogy is that of the law of gravitation. If we throw a stone, it falls on the ground. This law of gravitation was not framed by Newton, he discovered it. When he saw an apple falling on the ground from the branch, he realized that such a law must exist. Thus, he discovered this law and did not frame it. Similarly, there are certain principles of human relations. For instance, if one feels anger, one must keep it under control. Such an act will be beneficial to all. These principles of ethics are therefore discovered. Do not tell a lie to one another. Say what you know to be true. This is a principle. Its usefulness becomes apparent at every step in life. We appreciate a truthful person. If we tell a lie, we ourselves feel unhappy. Life cannot go on. There will be great confusion. A child does not speak untruths by nature. Often, parents teach their children to speak untruths. When the child desires something which the parents do not wish to give him, they conceal the object and tell the child that the desired object has disappeared. The child may be fooled a couple of times, but soon he knows the real situation and learns to speak untruths. The fact that by nature a person is truthful is a law that is discovered. Many other principles of ethics are similarly discovered. They are not arbitrarily framed by someone. In Bharat, these principles are termed dharma, the laws of life. All those principles which bring about harmony, peace and progress in the life of mankind are included in this term dharma. On the sound basis of dharma, then, we must proceed with the analysis of life as an integral whole. When nature is channelized according to the principles of dharma, we have culture and civilization. It is indeed this culture which will enable us to sustain and sublimate the life of mankind. Dharma is translated here as law. The English word religion is not the correct translation for dharma. As pointed out earlier, an integrated life is not only the foundation and the underlying principle of culture, but also its aims and ideals. Happiness of an individual. We have thought of life as integrated, not only in the case of collective or social life, but also in the individual life. Normally, an individual is thought of in the physical bodily form. Physical comfort and luxury are considered happiness. But we know that mental worry destroys bodily happiness. Everyone desires physical comfort. But if a person is imprisoned and there he is given the finest of foods, will he be happy? A person does not experience joy on getting nice food if this is also accompanied by a few abuses. There is a well-known incident in the Mahabharata. When Lord Krishna went to Hastinapur as an emissary of the Pandavas, Duryodhana invited him to enjoy his hospitality. Lord Krishna declined his invitation and went instead to Vidura's home. Overjoyed by the visit of this much revered guest, Vidura's wife served the banana skins while throwing away the kernel. But the Lord Krishna enjoyed even the meal of banana skin. That is why it is said, even a modest meal served with dignity and affection tastes better than the best delicacies served with disrespect. It is necessary, therefore, to take note of mental happiness as well. Similarly, there is intellectual happiness which must also be considered. Even after a person gets comforts for the body and prominence, affection, etc., which please the mind, but if he is involved in some intellectual confusion, he is reduced to a state almost similar to madness. And what is madness itself? A lunatic may have all physical comforts, he may be perfectly healthy and properly cared for by his relatives, but he does not possess intellectual happiness. Intellectual peace is also essential and important. We'll have to take all these things into consideration. Vote, bread, and happiness. Body, mind, intelligence, and the soul, these four make up an individual, but these are integrated. We cannot think of each part separately. The confusion that has arisen in the West is due to the fact that they have treated each of the above aspects of a human being separately and without any relation to the rest. When there was movement for a democratic structure, they proclaimed man is a political animal, and therefore his political aspiration must be attended to. Why should only one person be the king and all others his subject? Let everyone rule. In order to satisfy this political man, they gave him the right to vote. Now he didn't get the right to vote, but at the same time, other rights diminished. Then the questions arose. The voting right is nice, but what about food? What if there's nothing to eat? They wondered, now that you have the voting right, you are the king. Why need you worry? But man replied, what shall I do with the state if I don't get any food? I have no use of this voting right. I want bread first. Then came Karl Marx and said, yes, bread is the most important thing. The state belongs to the haves, so let us fight for bread. He saw man as primarily made up of body wanting bread, but those who followed the path shown by Karl Marx came to realize that they had neither bread nor voting rights. At this opposite end, there is the USA, there is both bread as well as voting rights. Even then, there is lack of peace and happiness. The USA tops the list of number of suicides, number of mental patients, and number of persons using tranquilizers to get sleep. People are puzzled as to the cause of this new situation. Man obtained bread, he got his voting right, still there is no peace, no happiness. Now they want back their peaceful sleep. Sound and undisturbed sleep is a scarce commodity in present-day America. The thinkers are coming to realize that there lies somewhere a fundamental lacuna in their system of life due to which they are not happy even after they have attained so much prosperity and affluence. Bharatiya approach to life. The reason is that they have not thought of the integrated human being. In our country, we have thoroughly considered this matter. That is why we have stated that progress of man means simultaneous progress of the body, mind, intellect, and soul of man. Often it has been propagated that Bharatiya culture thinks of salvation of the soul, that it does not bother about the rest. This is wrong. We do think of the soul, but it is not true that we do not consider body, mind, and intellect of much importance. Others have given importance to body alone. Therefore, our attention to the soul appears unique. With the passage of time, this created an impression that we are concerned only with the soul and not with other aspects of the human being. A young unmarried boy cares for his mother, but after marriage he cares for both his wife as well as his mother, and discharges his responsibilities towards both of them. Now, if anyone says that this man has no love for his mother, it would be untrue. A wife loves only her husband at first, but after the birth of a child, she loves both her husband and child. Sometimes an unthoughtful husband feels that his wife neglects him after the birth of the child. But this is generally not correct. If that were true, then the wife has certainly slipped in her duty. 4 Purusharthas. Similarly, while we recognize the need to pay attention to the soul, we do not neglect the body. Upanishads declare in unambiguous words, Nankamatma balahinen labhanka. That is, a weakling cannot realize the self. Again, Shariramadham khalu dharma sadhanam. That is, the body truly is the primary instrument to discharge the responsibilities that dharma enjoins. The fundamental difference between our position and that of the West is that whereas they've regarded the body and the satisfaction of its desires as the aim, we regard the body as an instrument for achieving our aims. We have recognized the importance of the body only in this light. The satisfaction of our bodily needs is necessary, but we don't consider this to be the sole aim of all our efforts. Here in Bharat, we have placed before ourselves the ideal of the fourfold responsibilities of catering to the needs of the body, mind, intellect, and the soul, with a view to achieve the integrated progress of man. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha are 4 Purusharthas, or human efforts. Purushartha means effort which befit a man. The longings for Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha are inborn in man, and the satisfaction of these gives him joy or Ananda. Of these 4 efforts too, we have thought in an integrated way. Even though Moksha has been considered the highest of these Purusharthas, efforts for Moksha alone are not considered to bring benefit to the soul. On the other hand, a person who engages in action while remaining unattached to its fruits is said to achieve moksha inevitably or and earlier. Artha includes what are known as political and economic policies. According to the ancients, it used to include justice and punishment as well as economics. Kama relates to the satisfaction of various natural desires. Dharma includes all those rules, fundamental principles, and ethical codes in accordance with which all the activities in respect of artha and kama are to be carried out and all the goals thereof to be achieved. This alone will ensure progress in an integrated and harmonious manner and lead ultimately to moksha. Importance of dharma. Thus, even though dharma regulates artha and kama, all the three are interrelated and mutually complementary. Dharma helps achieve artha. Even in business, one requires honesty, restraint, truthfulness, etc., which are the attributes of dharma. Without these qualities, one cannot earn money. It must be admitted that dharma is instrumental in attaining artha and kama. Americans proclaimed, "Honesty is the best business policy." In Europe, they said, "Honesty is the best policy." We go one step forward and assert, honesty is not a policy but a principle. That is, we believe in dharma not just because it is instrumental in acquiring artha, but because it is a fundamental principle of civilized life. Kama, too, can be attained only through dharma. Having produced the material things such as nice food, when, where, how, and in what measure it will be used can be determined only by dharma. If a sick person eats food meant for a healthy one and vice versa, both of them will be at a disadvantage. Dharma helps in restraining the natural tendencies of man, whereby he is able to determine what is beneficial to him apart from what is pleasurable. Hence, dharma is given the foremost place in our culture. Dharma is of primary importance, but we should not forget that it is not possible to practice dharma in the absence of artha. There is a saying, "What sin will not be committed by the one who is starving? Those who have lost everything become ruthless." Driven by hunger, even a rishi like Vishwamitra broke into the house of a hunter and ate the flesh of a dog. Therefore, we are enjoined to see that there is enough wealth created continuously, since wealth also strengthens dharma. Similarly, the government has to maintain law and order and prevent chaos, which definitely destroys dharma. At the time of chaos, the law of the jungle prevails, where the strong feed upon the weak. Therefore, the stability of the state is also essential for the prevalence of dharma. In order to do this, education, character building, spread of idealism, and suitable economic structures are necessary. Artha and Kama through Dharma. Artha is inclusive of political aspects of life as well. Excessive power of the state is also harmful for Dharma. It was said that a king should be neither too harsh nor too soft with his people. Excessive reliance on harsh measures produces a feeling of revolt in people. When the state usurps the rightful place of dharma, then there is this evil of the preponderance of the power of the state. Dharma suffers thereby. This is the reason for the decline of dharma in ruthless states. When the state acquires all powers, political and economic, the result is a decline of dharma. In this way, if the state has unlimited powers, the whole society looks towards the state for everything. Officers of the government neglect their duties and develop vested interests. These are all signs of the preponderance of powers of the state, whereby dharma suffers a setback. Hence, artha should not be allowed to acquire a hold in either of these two ways. Kama, too, can be considered on the same lines. If the physical needs are neglected and desires are entirely suppressed, dharma does not grow. Dharma cannot be observed if one has no food to eat. If the fine arts which satisfy the mind are altogether stopped, then the civilizing influence on people will not be present. The mind will become perverse and dharma neglected. If greediness of the gluttons of Rome or sensuousness of Yayati prevails, then duties will be forgotten. Hence, karma too must be pursued in consonance with dharma. We have thus considered the life of an individual in a thorough and integrated manner. We have set the aim of developing body, mind, intellect, as well as soul in a balanced way. We have tried to satisfy the manifold aspirations of man, taking care that efforts to satisfy two different aspirations are not mutually conflicting. This is the integrated picture of the fourfold aspirations for an individual. This concept of a complete human being, an integrated individual, is both our goal as well as our path. What should be the relation of this integrated human being with the society, and how the interests of the society should be promoted will be discussed tomorrow. End of Lecture 2.